In very simple terms, strategy has been thought of as choosing a position. Who are you going to serve, with what, and how are you going to do it? How do you get from that to what I'm actually going to do? What am I going to do? How much, when, in all functions, at all times, with what outcomes? And why do I want that? Well, I want that because I want to know what the results are going to be. I want to know what next month's revenue is going to be and sales, and I want to know how profits are going to grow, and I want to know what investors really want to know is they want to know what the cash flow forecast looks like. Where you get to is that any organisation is what we call a designed system. It may be written up in your business plans, it may be deliberate or it may be accidental, but that's what the executive board do. You design the way the organisation functions so that it could perform well. Your second job is then to manage the system so that it actually does work well. So when should I introduce products? What products should they be? Which customers should I target? How should I market to them? How many people do I hire? Of what skill mix? So what do we need? Well, what we need is we need quantified working models of the business. In any other field, when you build models, the model does what the real thing does. When engineers build a model of an aeroplane, it does what the aircraft does. When we build a model of a rail network, the model does what the rail network does. That's what we expect of models. And that allows us to explore the future. If we've got a model that does what the real world does, we can explore how it will behave in the future. And we can test our own strategies, and we can test external things that might happen to us. What if there was a recession? How would our business perform, and what would we do about it? So the generic questions that we need to answer is, why is performance going the way it is? Where might it go in the future? And how can we improve that performance into the future?
So we know that the starting point needs to be an understanding of how the performance we're interested in changes over time. So class 1 shows how to specify that performance time path. And here are some of the questions that we help you address in this class. Let's see how this works with an example.
So this is an IT support business. A very, very simple business. You'll find these organisations in every city, in every region around the world. This is the situation the company actually faced when we did this work. It had been growing successfully and was beginning to show signs of being less successful. It was losing clients. And the fear was that it would carry on getting worse, and the hope was that we could improve that over the coming 12 months. So we're looking at 24 months of history and 12 months of the future. And the financial results look pretty much the same. The profit chart had the same shape as that. No particular surprise to that.
So we now have a good specification of what the performance is that we want to improve. It could be how a profit's changing over time, but in this case it's what's happening to client losses. So in class 2 we show you how to keep asking the question, what causes this next item in the causal relationships? And when you do that, you get back to existing resources, you get back to decisions that you can choose from time to time, and you may discover that your performance is affected by external factors too. Let's see how this works with the IT support case.
Where we start is that we have time charts of the thing we're trying to explain. And this is the number of problems that our clients have been experiencing. We've been doing less good work to support our clients. So the problem rate has been going up. Why is that? Because our staff have been under pressure. This is the ratio between the amount of service demand coming from clients. So there's the service demand going up, 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 and the amount of capacity of our staff. So our staff have not been able to do the work that our clients have been giving us. Where does that come from? Well, that service demand comes from how many clients have we got and how many support hours do they need. I multiply clients by hours they need, and that gives me the total service demand. What's the service capacity? It's the number of people I have, which has not been increasing very much, multiplied by the number of hours of work, productive work, that our people can do. Every one of those relationships is very simple, but it describes what's really happening. That chart there is the actual company's records for the number of client problems. This is the actual number of clients. This is the actual number of staff. The important thing is when you're doing this work with the management team, they recognise everything on this picture.
So in class 2, we figured out how performance results from the resources that drive that performance. So in class 3, the next step is to identify how gains and losses of those factors cause those resources to grow or decline. It turns out this is a rather trickier idea than it might seem, and we need a particular framework for dealing with that. So let's see how clients are won and lost and see how staff are won and lost for the IT firm.
Now here's the little clever bit in the thing. If we want to understand what's happened to the number of clients we've got, think of this as a tank holding water, all right? And this is water flowing into the tank, and this is water flowing out of the tank. Well, that number has increased because more water flowed into the tank. We won a lot of clients. Right? Why did it fall again? Well, because water started flowing out of the tank. Clients were starting to be lost. This, by the way, is exactly the same way that cash works. This is cash in your bank account, cash paid in, cash paid out. This is the balance sheet and the cash flow statement for your business in financial terms. So all we're doing is we're applying the same discipline to customers that we apply to cash. This is a customer flow statement. And here's the arithmetic. We had 128 last month. We've got 121 this month. We added one. Therefore, how many did we lose? Anyone have any difficulty working that out? No, it's not. This is not kind of higher maths here. This is quite simple stuff. So this is what we call a resource, and this thing's a resource. This is the flow rates that add to and subtract from the resource, and it continues through time. The same framework applies to customers, it applies to staff, it applies to capacity, it applies to product range, it applies to cash, it applies to intangibles, and it applies to capabilities. Right? That's everything you need. That's the whole suite of things you need to build a business model, and they all behave like that. They fill up over time and they drain away over time.
So now class 3 has shown how gains and losses change the levels of resources that we've got. So the next step is to figure out what's driving those gains and losses. Following that process also identifies feedback mechanisms that arise from these relationships between the different resources and elements of the system. And this can cause some pretty complicated behaviour. Let's see how we can now explain the behaviour of the IT support firm by completing these drivers of resource gains and losses and the interdependencies in that case.
So now we can put all this together. There's the problems that our clients were getting. Those problems came from the imbalance between demand and capacity. The demand came from the number of clients, and the capacity came from the number of staff. So why did the number of staff fall? Well, the number of staff fell because there was a lot of pressure on staff because of this imbalance, which means that staff left. The work gets too much, people leave. Why did clients leave? Well, clients left because of these problems. The problems arose because of the pressure on staff, because of this imbalance. This is the system. This is the engineered system that generates this organization's performance. If you go to that link, you can play that business. You can actually make those decisions for that business and see how it performs. So these are the principles that lie behind this. What that gives you is a working, quantified model of the enterprise, or any part of the enterprise. We could just build that model about the HR system. We could just build a model about the customer pipeline, or any issue. You know, this is an issue-based model. We're trying to fix this problem. It could be for the whole enterprise. It could be your business plan for a number of years. I've now completed this by adding the income statement here. That's revenue, that's staff costs, that's overhead. Profit is revenue minus costs, and you can see what's happened to the revenue. This is a screenshot from the actual model you can play. Furthermore, it's obvious where the key performance indicators are in it. It's the pressure on staff, it's the problems per client, it's the client loss rate, it's the staff turnover. KPIs just fall out of these models automatically.
So this video has shown you how the first 4 classes of the course take you through the process to get you to what we call the core strategic architecture of the system. And it turns out this is a pretty common structure you'll find in many different cases, whether in business, public services or non-profit cases. You have some kind of performance outcome. In our case, we've looked at profit coming from revenue and costs, and revenue being driven by price and sales. Customers are won or lost depending on whether the price is attractive or not, and whether you have the products and services that they want, and whether you do enough marketing and selling activities to actually capture and retain those customers. Whether you get those sales and keep those customers depends on your ability to supply what's coming from them in the form of demand, and that supply is typically dependent on having the right numbers of staff and adequate capacity. Staff and capacity typically drive the costs. So this turns out to be a pretty useful template to guide the development of a core strategy model for many different kinds of organisation, and the course offers many different examples of how this template works in different situations. But it is only the core of that strategic architecture, so you will find that there are a number of additional frameworks covered in classes 5 to 10 that add to this core. We very often are interested not just in having the quantity of resources that we need, but also having resources of the right quality, staff with sufficient experience, products that are sufficiently appealing, customers who buy a lot rather than not buying so much. We also look at how resources develop through stages. The obvious example is junior, mid-level and senior level staff, but we also have a pipeline for customers. We have a development pipeline for products. And when it comes to capacity, we're usually looking at assets or some other kind of capacity that actually deteriorates through different stages. Competition is very important, of course, not just to commercial cases, but also to public services and non-profit cases who are competing for sources of finance and competing for staff. But mostly it's about competing for customers, and Class 7 shows exactly how competition works. Turns out that there are 3 very standard mechanisms by which competition works, and those mechanisms differ somewhat between new emerging markets, mature markets, and whether the product or service we're talking about is a consumable or durable. In Class 8 we look at policy, how you design decision rules to help you steer the strategy and implement the strategy over time. We do not take every decision every time from first principles. We have typically developed rules of thumb that guide the decision making that we follow. In Class 9 we look at the important contribution of intangible factors, things like reputation, morale, quality factors, and also the role of data and information. And lastly, in Class 10 we look at capabilities. And the distinction is that resources are useful and important things that we either have or to which we can get access. They may be tangible things like customers and staff, or they may be intangible things like morale and reputation. But capabilities are fundamentally different and additional to those resources. A capability is how good we are at creating and sustaining those resources we have. So Class 10 shows how to do this. And the great thing about these additional classes and frameworks is that each one of them is useful on its own, as well as when it's used as part of the whole architecture. So, for example, a customer pipeline is a very useful framework and model to develop for many different kinds of organisations, whether or not you include it as part of the larger model for the whole organisation. So I hope you found that useful information about the course. We offer quite some flexibility on how you take the course. You can take just the summary elements of the course, or you can take the full course in blocks, and there are options to take it with or without tuition. And the course is also free for teachers who register with us.